So with that, is there anything from the consent agenda that the board would like to bring up into the full agenda for today? Okay, seeing none, I would look for a motion to move the agenda. Thank you, Roy. And that's Allison way down there, right? Yeah. And seconded by Allison, all in favor. Carried. Okay. For the approval of minutes, we need a motion to approve the minutes as well. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes? Okay, Jeff is going to do it, or my friend Harry here on the side, and Bev. All in favor? Carried. We're moving on to the Finance and Administration Advisory Committee meetings, okay? And what does NA mean?
It means that you don't technically have to have a motion because you receive them when you receive the agenda package.
Okay. Is there there's information to be provided here though, correct? Go ahead.
So Jeff has just pointed out that there is an error in the minutes from the FNA, and we'll follow up on that. This is received for information, and we will make that correction before they're tabled for approval at the FNA. But just so you're aware, the motion under item 3 in the Finance and Admin Committee is not fully captured. So somehow part of the motion got deleted. So we'll address that with the final version that's tabled at the committee.
Okay. So do we need have somebody to talk to these? Or are they?
I'm happy to take any questions. We made an effort to make sure that they were provided for this meeting because of the items being tabled at this meeting. It's been a concern of the board previously that they didn't have the minutes of committees before addressing items considered by committees. So they are draft, but if you have any questions, happy to answer them.
Okay, do you have any questions for Sally on the Finance Administration Advisory Committee meeting minutes? Okay, seeing none, how about on the Policy and Planning Advisory Committee meeting minutes? Okay. Then I would suggest that we are in the position to proceed to item 3, which is the General Manager's update, and that is Sally.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So the first 3 items are of ongoing interest to everybody, so I'll just raise them to your attention. The first one is the connection of the water and sewer lines to our building. So our understanding is that the town did consider this in camera and at this time has not rendered any sort of decision on it pending receiving legal counsel. So I understand from the CAO that we'll hear back from the town sometime at the earliest mid to late January. So I'll let you know what I hear back when I hear back. The second one regarding the KMP Trail, Lanark County is now actively drafting on behalf of itself and Renfrew and Frontenac, an agreement of purchase and sale, but which is tentatively being described as a lease to own agreement. So the ball's in their court, as it were, and we're interested to see what that draft document looks like. In the meantime, we have asked them for a list of all the properties that they had identified during their legal title search. If there are any, I'll say, problem properties that they identified that we'll have to address. And then the third item, which is that property outside of Wilbur Station, where there's a concern on an easement on the trail itself. So we have a date with the court scheduled for March of next year. So it'll go before a court officer of the court in March. Of course, you're all invited this Saturday to our Kintail Christmas, Country Christmas. We're hoping that the weather cooperates. It would have been brilliant if it had been a week ago with all that snow. We're a bit concerned with the rain, but it does look like it's going to drop in temperature, so we're hoping it all goes without a hitch. In terms of some things that are major projects we're working on, so the Kashwakamak class environmental assessment, the consultants are currently preparing documentation regarding both their investigations as well as their preliminary assessment of the different options. And so we're hoping to have the Community Liaison Committee meeting at this point sometime in January, and then going out to the public midwinter at some point. So there have been some delays on that, but we feel the project's still in, more or less on track and heading where we want it to go. I guess the only other thing is that, we did have a good year of capital repairs at our various sites, both dams and conservation areas. And so I guess I'd like to thank all of you for approving our capital budget and allowing us to make those improvements, because it makes a huge difference. The ones that we made at our various dams not only were for the integrity of the dam itself, but for operator health and safety. So very much valued by staff, and the improvements that we've made at the conservation areas, particularly I'll say at Purdon this year, make those sites more accessible. We've widened them to be not only more safe due to their integrity of the structures themselves, but also wider, so that a broader cross-section of our residents can enjoy them. So that's all I have to say. One last thing. I would like to announce that, I don't know if people noticed this, Allison Simon is retiring after 23 years with the authority. Allison is a font of knowledge, and I've worked very closely with her over the past few years on the watershed plan and some other projects that we're currently working on. And so, of course, we wish her well. She's been a tremendous asset to the organization, and we will miss her. So just wanted to share that with you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Sally? Yes, Janet.
I just wanted to second that Allison did an amazing job on the Mississippi River Watershed Plan. And I think that the background reports about the watershed and then the plan itself were just outstanding, and she will be missed.
Okay. Any other questions for Sally on her report? Okay, seeing none here and none on the screen, we'll move on to item 4, which is the watershed condition report. And Jen North is going to take us through that. Thank you, Jen.
There we go. I do have a slide deck if you want to put it on. It's just below there. The down below, the blue one. Yeah, perfect. Perfect. So good morning. We have had, you can go to the next slide there. We have had below average rainfall for the last 3 months. which has caused lower than normal conditions and flows throughout the watershed. This has drastically been different than the last few years, where we've seen fairly wet fall seasons. So we actually haven't seen a dry fall since 2016 was the last time we had a significant dry fall. So flows in the main river have currently been sitting at minimum flows of around 5 CMS for most of the fall season. You can see in the graph, it's kind of cut off a bit, but definitely lower than our historical average. Most of the small tributaries have seen low summer-like flows throughout the fall season as well. The drawdown on all of the upper lakes have been completed, except for Mazenal Lake, which is the last lake to start its drawdown. So it's currently being drawn down and will probably be completed next week. Crotch Lake is currently being operated to build through to early January. We're building the water level there. It will then also be drawn down to provide maximum storage in the system by early to mid-March. Due to the dry fall, Crotch Lake levels are currently sitting below the historical average for this time of year. The main goal over the next month will be to store as much water as possible in Crotch to ensure there's enough water to maintain flows downstream from that mid-January through to April. The next slide. So the long-term forecasts are indicating a slightly drier, colder winter, even though it doesn't seem like it now with the warmer temps. That is what the long-term forecast is indicating. And plus it is predicting a higher precipitation amounts in the month of February. So you can go to the next slide there. So at this time, here are some highlighted concerns over the winter months due to the dry fall we've had. As previously stated, ensuring Crotch Lake has enough water to maintain flows downstream from mid-January to April. At this time, the management plan will be to operate the dams to maintain levels on the upper lakes closer to the upper end of the drawdown target range until we see more water in the system to alleviate the concerns of filling the lakes in the spring. If we end up seeing below average snowpack come February, it will then be decided by the management team if and when to start putting logs back in some of our dams to make sure we capture as much of the runoff as possible. So over the last couple years, we have seen significant rainfall events and snow melts occur late December, early January. So if this trend was to happen again this year, it would be very helpful for the system under its current conditions. So we will wait and see what we end up getting in the next couple months. Any questions?
Yeah. Any questions for Jet?
Thank you. I'm just wondering, I know that the lakes are really low up in North Frontenac, like people are very concerned. Is there any correlation with the aquifers right now? Because this morning, I got some calls because there's a spring on River Road in North Frontenac that people use for potable water. It's completely dry.
We don't monitor groundwater in kind of our department. So we don't associate it with our operating plans. But it would be a concern if we saw more of a drought-like conditions. But as of right now, there is enough water in the system to maintain above our kind of low water triggers.
Kelly, could you maybe just summarize the groundwater monitoring that we do?
Definitely, happy to. So we actually partner as one of our Category 1 programs with the Provincial Groundwater Monitoring Network program out of the MECP in Toronto. They're the ones who have set up the site selection, they set up the monitoring frequency, they pay for all the equipment, all that whatnot. And then they do all the analysis. But what we do is the groundwork. We go out there, we ground truth the data, we download the loggers, we check on the maintenance. So that's our agreement and the work that we do for the province. So yes, we do have 8 monitoring wells throughout the watershed. In North Frontenac, there's one near Buckshot Lake. Then in Central, there's one near Sharbet Lake. And then there's some here in Carleton Place and a handful of them in the city. So again, because our watershed's so huge, it feels kind of sparse, but it's because it's a provincial run program and they have to represent different ecosystems and different pressures of development. But it's all under their mandate and program organization.
Okay, thank you. Jan, I have a question for you. So the amount of water that you're releasing from Mazenod, is that going to be enough to make up what you need in Crotch?
As of right now, yes. It will all depend on how much we decide to keep in Mazenod and kind of store as extra for just in case we do see lower than normal snowpack. So that will be an indication. And of course, any kind of rainfall or melt between now and then will replenish in Crotch Lake. So.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Thank you very much for the presentation, Jen. Okay, we're moving to item number 5, which is the budget control report. And Stacy, you'll be leading us through that.
Good morning. So this is the budget control report as of the end of October. We're still on track for the year. Overall projecting on the operating side, being down about $46,000. And a large part of that, all of it mainly, is savings under wages and benefits because we've had empty positions throughout the year, which we're hoping we resolve next year a bit more. On the capital side, we've been using the approved 10-year capital plan from the spring, which was a bit different from the approved budget. But as noted in other areas, we've had a number of projects that have been delayed and pushed into 2024, such as our IT server upgrades, et cetera, and the water and sewer connection. So we didn't spend nearly what we anticipated this year, but it's really just moved to 2024. We are anticipating being able to put about 220 into the reserves between operating and capital surplus heading into next year.
Okay, any questions for Stacy? Okay, I'm assuming that since you mentioned the reserve, item number 6 was the year-end contribution to reserves. So basically, do you need to elaborate on that anymore? Or?
I don't think so. Again, we should read it for the motion.
Okay, well, I'll read the motion for that. Resolve that the Board of the Directors direct staff to transfer any unspent levied capital dollars as of December 31st, 2023 to the Water Control Structure Reserve. And item 2 is transfer any operating surplus for the year ending December 31st, 2023 to the Water Control Structure Reserve. Could I have someone move that motion, please? If you may. Well, she had started mentioning reserves, so I wondered if the two were running together. That's what confused, not intentionally. Okay, we asked already if anybody had anything on the budget control report. So I think we are in item 6. I've read the motion now, so we could put the motion on the floor and then, or should we receive the report first? Would somebody like to move that? Okay, Allison and Taylor. Okay, and, okay, Stacy, comment?
Just to let people know, the recommendation for moving any excess funds or surplus funds to the water control structure reserve is because that is our reserve that is the farthest behind. So that's we're trying to push excess there.
And, okay, is the reserves going in this year, are they better than normal, poorer than normal? Is it,
They're they were turned off. I'm sorry. The as everyone's aware, we've been increasing over the last few years the amount we're requesting for the capital levy to try and increase our reserves. A significant number of them are well below what the targets were set. The targets were only established in July 2022. Before that, there were no targets, so it's still a fairly new process to be having a target and building those balances up.
okay, thank you. Any other questions or part of the discussion? If not, I'd take it to a vote. All those in favor? The motion is carried. Okay, we have a couple reports arising from the Finance and Administration Committee. So the first one is the Reserve Policy Update Report, and Stacy, you're leading us through that.
Yes, thank you. So the reserve policy was set in July 2022, and it was noted at that time there would be additional updates required when we got to the point of doing the introduction of the category 1, 2, 3. And so this reserve policy update is to address that and look to establish category 2 and 3 operating reserves and a category 3 capital reserve. In order to facilitate that, my recommendation was using the basis we had for creating the MOUs, which was 14% of the operating levy, which was a 6 and an 8 split, and using that same percentages, applying them to the current balance in the operating reserve and allocating those portions to the category 2 operating and the category 3 operating. And similarly, the MOU process was indicating 2% of the capital levy be allocated towards the category 3 capital. So I used that same basis in my recommendation for 2% of the amount of the current capital reserve to set up a category 3 capital reserve. We also currently, to date, have had a small reserve that was called Museum Building and Art. And I'm suggesting that be closed and incorporated into the category 3 operating reserve. The amounts that we were looking at taking out of the operating reserve, approximately 208,000, which moving 89,000 into the category 2 operating reserve, and combined with the 119,000 out of the operating reserve and closing the 6,000 building and museum reserve, creating 125,760 to a category 3 operating reserve, and setting up 39,000 into the category 3 capital reserve. And I was proposing taking that out of the current building and HQ reserve because it's one of the healthier ones and there's not as much of a requirement on it currently.
Okay, any questions for Stacy? So basically what's happening here, there's a lot of numbers and stuff in there. I'll give it my twist. It's basically just bringing us into alignment with the new reality of the categories 1, 2, and 3 that we didn't have to deal with before. Would that be a fair summation? Yes. Okay. So I have the motion. Resolved that the Board of Directors, one, approve amendments of the reserve policy to provide for Category 2 and 3 reserves as outlined in Report 3370-23, and two, approve transfer of reserve balance as set out in Report 3370-23. Could I have someone to motion that? Okay, motion by Andrew, seconded by Bev. All in favor? It is carried. Okay, our next report, again arising from the Finance Administration Committee, is the draft 2024 budget report, and that's Sally and Stacy to present.
Okay, so this document has been several months in the making. Of course, staff begin the budget process in the summer, looking at current state and future needs and where the pressures are. And just reviewing the process that came before you, we came to the board to get budget direction regarding the increase to the municipal levy in particular in September. And then we tabled a draft budget based upon those assumptions at Finance and Admin. And so after today, where we're tabling it to you, if you approve, we will be circulating it to all your member municipalities for comment. And I typically follow up with your CAOs to see, do you want me to present to your municipalities, or if the CAO has any questions, there's an opportunity for me to meet with council or committees thereof to review the draft budget. And then we'll be bringing it forward in February for approval. The one difference this year is, you'll recall earlier this year, the board approved the separate tabling of our financial statements in the AGM, and that was reflected in the meeting schedule that was approved by consent earlier. So the Finance and Admin Committee will instead be receiving the financial statements in March, and it'll be coming forward to the board in April. So that's the process that we're following. Highlights year over year in between operating capital. You can see that operating is more or less, there we go, is almost unchanged between 23 and 24, but capital is going up. And that's further to what Stacy was saying, that the board has approved that we need to build our capital reserves because we have some significant projects coming down the pipe that we need to be building our reserves for. Overall, the board had approved in totality, it equates to a 6.5% increase. Of course, it varies amongst your municipalities depending on what your assessment allocation is. So in terms of where the money's being spent and where the money's coming from, you can see that the majority of money is being expended on Category 1 programs, which are the mandatory programs under legislation. Then the Category 2 and 3 programs. Category 2 are the ones that we provide in support of municipal programs, and Category 3 are programs that we deliver, education, visitor services, that sort of thing. Corporate services, these are identified in the legislation as general services, but I think most people think of them as corporate in nature. So this would include the operations of this building, IT, fleet, all that sort of thing. Then under revenues, you can see that the bulk is recovered through the municipal levy. We do have a sizable amount recovered through fees, and therefore your approval with the consent agenda of updates to our fee schedule is critical to ensuring that we're doing proper cost recovery. We will be drawing down the reserve funds and anticipate further federal grants and the like this year. So the next couple of slides provide a high-level understanding of where and how the money is being spent on a program level. So you can see, and we've provided where the money is also coming from to deliver those programs. So under watershed management, so this slide is looking at all category 1, and at the bottom are the corporate services. So under category 1, we have 3 main headings: watershed management, flood and erosion control, and conservation areas. And this aligns to how our previous budgets were presented. So we were trying to maintain, to the greatest degree possible, continuity between previous budgets and this new format per the new regs. So we've generally divided it where appropriate into technical studies, and these are identified in the various detailed sheets in the package. Planning and regulations is our administration of sections 28 and 39 of the Conservation Authorities Act. So that's the whole permitting as well as enforcement at as and when necessary at our conservation areas. Flood and erosion control. This is the work that Jen and team do in terms of identifying how the system needs to be operated in the short and long term. A lot of the predictive analysis that needs to be done, as well as our mapping program, et cetera. And then there's the actual physical dam operations and maintenance. I think I need to correct myself because Stacy looked at me ever so gently. I said mapping program. Our mapping program used to be covered under operating. It is now a capitalized expense. So thank you, Stacy, for looking at me. Conservation areas. I think that's somewhat self-explanatory, grass cutting, hazard tree, but we do undertake occasional technical studies. You can see that we do have some modest work occurring in terms of technical studies this year. And that would include, let me just check on that. Oh, that's interesting. Anybody ever experienced that before? Oh, my binder. I'll put that back, sorry. How could I forget? Our mandatory, we have several mandatory studies we have to do this year. One is the land inventory. We had started that before Ross left because Ross was the fountain of all knowledge. Some of you may have known Ross if you were here last term, but before Ross retired, we wanted to, do as much knowledge transfer as possible. But this land inventory is now a regulatory requirement. In addition, we need to develop a conservation area strategy. So on both of those, these are items that Allison Simon, who's retiring, has made good progress on. And we're going to be doing a transfer of those projects before she leaves the end of this year. But again, really making an effort to make sure that before people retired with that knowledge that we are able to get that information. And then a new project that we're proposing to do next year is the Milliken Tail Master Plan update. So the master plan for the Milliken Tail hasn't been updated in, I think, 20 plus years, maybe even longer. I can't remember for that specific one. All of them, suffice to say, are largely out of date. And particularly because of this new regulatory environment and funding framework that we're operating in, we felt it was opportune to revisit what the master plan of that site says and what do we want for the future of that, because there has been a lot of discussion over the past few years of how we're going to operate and maintain that site going forward and over the long term. So we're proposing that that would be a project that we undertake next year.
Yes, Andrew.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Sally, I note in the conservation areas that while the total is not very different from the last year, the amount in the first line, which you said is essentially the maintenance type activities, is less than 75% of what it was. Is that moving things around, or is that an actual change to level of service?
No change in service, you're right. And I meant to mention that off the top. Where you do see significant deviations, it's because we've moved them from category 1 into now these category 2 and 3 programs and services. So for example, visitor services, the operation of the museum, the bookings of weddings and that sort of thing at the conservation areas. Anything having to do with the structures there are now category 3. So yes, that's why you're seeing that significant drop.
Okay, Bev.
Thank you. Am I right in assuming that category 2 expenses are entirely covered by category 2 revenues?
The short answer, I guess, is yes. However, I think it needs to be recognized that were you to go out to the private sector to get those, or if we weren't doing other programs at the Conservation Authority, we wouldn't be able to provide you such, reduced pricing. In other words, category 1 people, like there are people we have to have in this building to deliver category 1 programs and services. Your category 2 services are now in fact, offsetting some of the category 1 pressures. In other words, you would have had to pay it anyway because we needed those people in the building to deliver the category 1, but we're now optimizing their use to make sure that we can help our member municipalities on these other matters.
Okay, anything more you have another page or so?
Okie doke. So that's category 1. Categories 2 and 3. So the category 2, monitoring and watershed planning. So this is the type of services, Bev, that you were referring to. So these are the services we provide that provide information to your municipalities to support your planning decision-making by and large. So, and here's an example, Andrew, where you can see that it was 0 because it used to be part of the overall. And now we've identified it as being wholly category 2. And the reason why it's 0 is because there is the MNRF program as well, and doing the breakdown based upon our timesheets this year, it was becoming too difficult to make the distinction from going backwards to 2023. But on a go-forward basis, we are capturing the difference between our category 1 monitoring program and our category 2 monitoring program. And then you can see under the category 3, so we do show continuation of the stewardship program, and thank you for approving its ongoing continuation as a consent item in this agenda. The education program is modest because we had agreed to just move forward this year with a summer program. We're carrying over the investigation of what we want to do going forward with our education program. You may recall that the board had notionally agreed to $20,000 to be coming through the category 3 MOUs, and that's reflected in the column that says 19,970. So you can see there is a lot of cost recovery proposed to occur, and depending on whether we meet targets, we may not in fact need to use that full 20,000 coming from your member municipalities. And then lastly is visitor services. And again, you can see we are hoping for significant cost recovery fee for service. And this is an area where we need to have these kind of discussions going forward when we review the Milliken Tail Master Plan on how do we see cost recovery occurring at that site? What does that look like? What do we want for that property going forward? So then lastly, in terms of a summary, I'll just highlight what you see in red. These numbers are slightly adjusted from what you saw if you sat on the Finance and Admin Committee. We've tweaked those numbers. They've actually gone down in total by 15,000. So it's a minor, in the scheme of things, modification, but just wanted to raise that to your attention. So you can see we have several capital projects planned for this coming year. DSR stands for Dam Safety Review. So a dam safety review at Lanark Dam. At Farm Lake, we're looking to do a condition assessment as well as a risk assessment study. Widow Lake Dam, another dam safety review. And then the biggest one, of course, is ongoing completion of the environmental assessment for Kashwakamak Lake Dam. And then once we have a preferred solution, is moving forward with the detailed design. So that's on the water and erosion control structure side of things. At our conservation areas, we're planning to continue to replace critical sections of the boardwalk at Purdon and to replace the stairs that lead up to the upper parking lot. We're also going to be moving forward with work on the workshop at our Milliken Tail site. This is something that had been put on hold for the past couple of years. We are carrying forward the Milliken Tail washrooms. Again, the board had said if we were successful in getting a grant to cover 50% of the cost. So again, it's grant dependent. And then various improvements at Morris Island and at our structures at the Milliken Tail. And then lastly, there's a handful of other projects largely related to our infrastructure at the dam. So the gauge network, which is the information Jen draws upon and the rest of the team to do that kind of predictive analysis and make decisions. The Trimble system, which if memory serves me correctly, and maybe Euro can correct me if I'm wrong, is a system used for collecting data in the field. Is it the field equipment, or can you elaborate on that?
It is a surveying system.
Yeah, very good. Excellent. Thank you. Ongoing work to improve our model. So every year we're continuing to, enhance the model to allow for better analysis and from that better mapping and improve predictive analysis and from that better operations. Because as Jen highlighted to you, when things aren't going perfectly, we need to make some judgment calls, and having a tool that allows you to run different scenarios to see the consequences and potential risks associated with those different scenarios really helps us to mitigate risk for everybody. And then DRAPE is a photographic tool. It's aerial photography that we obtain, I think, is it once every 4 or 5 years? Every 5 years from the province, and we have to pay for that data set. Again, that information is critical to allow us to make sure that whatever mapping work and analyses we're conducting is based upon current land use. And then lastly, the AV equipment in this room, we're revisiting, looking at potentially having to upgrade parts of it because we have had problems with the system this year. And so we're going to investigate that further and see if we can make a purchase. So that in a nutshell is the overall budget. Of course, in your agenda package are detailed sheets for each program. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Andrew, you have a question?
Thanks. Of course, I should have thought of these when we were in the finance committee, but I'm slower than I used to be. The debt repayment, there's a moderate increase in that. Is that to do with renegotiating debt, or is that to do with taking on additional debt?
I'll pass that to Stacy.
That is to taking on additional debt to cover the sewer and water connection because it's becoming a much larger cost than originally anticipated, the projection is that we would finance it.
Thanks. So for the existing debt, is that all fixed term, or is that likely to be something that becomes more onerous in the coming years?
They're fixed.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you. So we have a motion here. Resolved that the Board of Directors approve the draft 2024 budget for circulation to member municipalities for comment. Could I please have a mover? Moved by Janet, seconded by Roy. All in favor? Carried.
I just wanted to say, again, I'm chair of the Finance Committee, and I've been looking at these budgets for 9 or 10 years now, and this was this change in how the budget is formatted and presented is just so much easier to understand. And I want to compliment Stacy and Sally on this. I did that at the committee meeting, but I used to spend hours trying to map reserves to expenditures to, I mean, it was just unbelievable. So much clearer. And I think the fact that we've had, the little discussion is just a hallmark of the fact that it's just so much easier to understand. So thank you, Stacy, for doing that.
Okay, and I guess the only other comment I would have is this will be the draft budget that'll be sent out to your CAOs and stuff. So you have some foreknowledge of what's going to them. So you could give them a heads up on what's coming. Okay, our next is item 9, which is the 2024 mileage per diem and honorarium rates, and it's report 3378. And Sally is going to lead us through that.
Okay, so every year we try to revisit the mileage per diem and honorarium rates. In previous years, there was a decision made to use a different rate for the board members from what has typically been used for staff. And it was to be based on the Travel, Meals, and Hospitalities Expense Directive that the province issues. And it dropped the rate for members from 56.5 cents per kilometer down to 40 cents per kilometer. Since then, I've learned that this is like the bottom of what is offered, and that ministries within the province and agencies of the province are absolutely given leave to negotiate with their collective agreements or whomever and provide a higher rate of mileage. So what this report is recommending is that we put the mileage rate for board members back in alignment with the rate that's given to staff. And we're proposing that the staff rate increase by 3.3%, which is the same rate that we applied on the employee salary side in the draft budget, based upon what the cost of living rate was when we were began drafting the budget back in September. So you can see as well that the board per diem and honorarium haven't changed since 2020. The previous board had implemented a freeze on both the per diems and the honorarium. So I'm suggesting that we revisit that. When this was last tabled, I was directed to carry out a survey of other conservation authorities to see how our rates align to others. And you'll see that in the attachment to this report. And at that time, we were very close to what other organizations were using, at least at the per diem side of things. That's on page 101 of your agenda package. And I feel that rather than, waiting several years and then doing a major increase, that I think it's appropriate that the board does authorize itself a cost of living increase. We think it's really important that our board members are properly compensated. We need you at this table. We value your input, and therefore we also recognize that several of you are having to make a financial or vacation sacrifice to attend these meetings, and we want to make sure that you are appropriately compensated for that. In terms of the honorarium for the board chair, you can again see in table 1 on it that from the 2022 survey that our honorarium is below the average, and I think it is appropriate, especially given all the changes that this organization has gone through and is going to continue to go through, and the many meetings that Paul and I have, that we increase it similarly by that cost of living increase of 3.3. And then lastly, that we introduce a similar kind of honorarium at a third the rate for the vice chair, because our vice chair has in recent years and ongoing participated in agenda reviews and executive committee meetings when needed, and certainly takes the place of the chair as required. So that's my recommendations, and happy to answer any questions you have.
Any questions for Sally? Okay, seeing none, I will make a comment that I think that it's pretty reasonable to raise the mileage rates we had, because we have people that are coming from a fairly long distance and stuff, and with the volatility in the petroleum sector, we were falling behind following the provincial rates. And I think the province is probably, they're trying to discourage staff doing any driving in their own vehicles. At least that's what was occurring when I was there. So they keep the rates exceptionally low, and then they discourage that. Whereas it's a reality that we're living with. So we have a motion before us. We resolve that the Board of Directors approve the following rates to take effect January 1st, 2024. A 3.3% increase in the mileage rate paid to MVCA employees. B, realignment of the board mileage rate to equal the employee mileage rate. C, a 3.3 increase to the board members per diem. D, a 3.3% increase in the chair's honorarium. And E, a vice chair honorarium equal to 1/3 the chair's honorarium. And 2, direct staff to amend the MVCA's administrative policy bylaw to reflect the above decision. Do I have someone to move that? Moved by Andrew, seconded by Bev. Okay, any discussion? Any more discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? It is carried. Okay, we have item number 10, which is the wetland offsetting policy update. And this is a report writing from the Policy and Planning Advisory Committee, and Matt, Craig, and Kelly will be dealing with this.
Good morning. I'm Kelly Stiles. I'm the staff biologist. You've met me a few times throughout the year at various other meetings. Beyond doing the biology monitoring end, I also help out with planning policy. So today I'm going to be talking about wetland offsetting guidelines that we would like to develop. The background and purpose for developing these is that offsetting is actually a pretty common practice throughout the province. However, there are very few standards and directions, particularly here in Eastern Ontario. The principle will always be an MVCA protection first. Our current regulations and policies will always still stand. This is just going to be an addendum in that package that will give us options in case of an MZO or something else that forces us to approve something that we normally wouldn't due to regulated areas such as a wetland. The policy update and direction to develop this guideline will help clarify expectations for us, the public, consultants, you name it. It will improve and streamline the approval process because we can do everything on the front end. And then we'll achieve better ecological outcomes on the back end. So we're going to do that by following a mitigation hierarchy. This is a standard process used at a number of other CAs across Ontario, as well as other agencies such as Ducks Unlimited. It's a common approach, and it sets out for a basic guideline of no net loss. We'll get to what comes after net loss. So first, you avoid impacts as best as you can. You minimize. If you do have to impact, you minimize it. And then you mitigate and restore what you can. But sometimes there's still residual damage that just can't be undone after a driveway has gone in, a subdivision has to lay a water pipe, you name it. So then you offset and you create a new habitat to hopefully compensate for that loss. What we're going to ask is that they aim for net gain. Instead of just trying to replace base level with base level, we're going to ask for more. The reason why we're going to ask for more and try and achieve an environmental net gain is that it is actually an industry standard. City of Ottawa has it in their documents. TRCA, CVC, Conservation Ontario, and Ducks Unlimited have written documents about the need for aiming for a net gain. It allows for the complexities and uncertainties and time lags of developing ecological systems. It takes time to grow seeds. It takes time to establish habitat and animal use. And then it creates a surplus by area that provides a built-in contingency if anything doesn't work in reality compared to the design process. So then what are we proposing to get this net gain? We're going to ask for a minimum of a 2-to-1 area replacement. This should help us set the groundwork for achieving that net gain in functionality. And then for the wetland setback area, which is the surrounding perimeter, the shoreline, the upland area, we'll maintain asking that at a 1-to-1 ratio, just because anything that is constructed will then naturally have a shoreline area. And then the challenges that come with this. When you're dealing with interfering with the natural systems, there's always going to be difficulties. It's going to be impossible to replicate some wetlands just due to the complexity of their natural system. Bogs and fens are just much too complex. They take thousands of years to develop their sensitive ecosystems. So they're not going to be part of the negotiation. What could definitely come up in our watershed is swamps and marshes. We have lots of those. And swamps are more of a challenge because they are woody. It takes decades to redevelop a swamp. Whereas a marsh, cattails, lily pads, those kind of plants, they pop up pretty quickly. So there's a sliding scale there that will be considered during pre-consultation when and if this comes across my desk. A created wetland may also never reach the same level of productivity or functionality of the loss feature, which is why, again, we are aiming for a net gain of at least a greater area that will be dedicated wetland habitat. Quantifying ecosystem function and equivalencies and a net gain is challenging. We just don't have the science to understand all the nuances and all the interconnected domino effect that that one wetland might have on its surroundings. And then also the economic valuation of the property that that wetland is occupying, as well as the economic valuation of that green ecosystem function that that wetland provides to our economy in floodplain storage, water treatment, you name it, as well as recreational benefits. That all has a dollar value, but it can be really hard to stamp that. And lastly, constrained sites, which is why we're being pushed into approving things in wetlands in the first place. Constrained sites and developed subwatersheds make it very challenging to find suitable places to do offsetting close to the area of impact. If any animal is being displaced, or even the hydrology is being displaced from that location, we want to be able to give it a new place to go nearby. But we also are proposing another hierarchy that says on-site. If we can't do on-site, off-site in the same subwatershed. If we can't do that, off-site somewhere else nearby. And then you go out from there to try and get a maximum gain for the ecosystem function across the whole watershed. So that is my short and sweet, but obviously there is more information in your packages and you're welcome to ask questions. Yes.
Yeah, he's jumping at the bit here. Okay, so yes, we have some questions. Go ahead, Mr. Lewis.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this since our planning meeting and I've been thinking more how it'll work, if it can work. So you have a wetland and at one side you want to, there's a quarter of an acre of wetland that's kind of not really working out too well. You want to change it. So can you go to the other side of the wetland and dig out half an acre, a big hole, so it fills up with water and make that a wetland? Is that what we're thinking? of
That
doing?
would be the ideal on that hierarchy of do the offsetting on site.
Right.
If that's feasible, that's definitely one of the examples in the appendix of the TRCA document, where they say they have a large acreage of a farm. There's a wetland in the back 1/3, but there's also upland area on the other side. That upland area on the far back corner of that parcel is not accessible, it's not developable. Why don't we put our offsetting there so that we can sort of straighten out and edge down on the more accessible side? That's just one example. So that again would be creating the offsetting on site in conjunction with the feature. So that would be the #1 preferred if it's possible. If that is a fully developed forest, if that's Canadian Shield, there's other things that might not make that the ideal location for offsetting. So it's all very site specific.
So I heard though, a minute, like in the woods and everything takes thousands of years. Does that, you don't have to wait thousands of years till it becomes a wetland?
No, but there are different types of swamps. For
Right.
example, there are shrubby swamps that might take 5-10 years for those shrubs to establish and start doing their ecosystem functions the way they would have before disturbance. A cedar swamp, a black ash swamp, those trees take 80 years to grow. So you're dealing with slightly different things depending on what kind of ecosystem it is. But a bog and a fen, because of the way their hydrology works, because of that accumulation of peat moss, that's not easily replicatable. So that's not even going to be something discussed. Many CAs have that same sort of clause where MZO we're not discussing hurting a fen or a bog. So it can't be offset suitably, so.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Bev.
Thank you. So just so I understand, are you saying if someone, a developer wants to work in a bog or a fen, it's just off limits? They can't do it even though there's an order that says they can?
You're also at that point, you're getting into the MNR species at risk or MECP species at risk regs. There's a whole lot of other things going on if you're dealing with bogs and fens, and you just can't suitably offset it. Negotiating that just isn't going to be feasible. So
So does our policy effectively say that?
it will. There is a clause, a description in there saying, this cannot be applied to bogs and fens. They're just too sensitive.
Okay, thank you.
And that wording is taken from, again, similar CAs who have already enacted this stuff.
Okay, Andrew.
Thanks. As you say, looks really challenging.
It is.
Do you have, or is the Conservation Authority developing a sort of inventory of potential offsetting sites?
Not completely, but through some of the other work we've been doing through the watershed plan, as well as our natural systems plans that Allison's been working on over the last few years, we're definitely highlighting areas of highest risk for impact. And we're also getting a good sense of where our varied habitats are, where stewardship can occur. Even programs like our City Stream Watch program highlight areas where good stewardship could happen, as well as our partnerships with the ALICE program, the Rural Clean Water program. We're getting to know people with property who have water courses that are interested in doing rehabilitation, enhancements, whatnot. So we are very slowly going down that path, but we are not there yet.
So to follow on from that, presumably if a developer is going to be doing some form of on-site compensation,
Yeah.
you're going to make them do it.
Yes.
If it's off-site, then is that where the Conservation Authority itself or some third party will do it? And how do you figure out the costs?
Exactly. The intention is to still have this be a proponent-led system. So they design it, they pay for it, but we can definitely work in consultation with them saying, all right, these are your limitations. These are some opportunities we're aware of. We don't have the staff resources to be designing these things and directing these things, but we can definitely be at the table negotiating them. Especially once we get this guideline document in place, we'll have a consistent piece of paper to refer back to saying, these are our needs. This is what you've got to show us. This is the process we follow.
Thanks. And third and last for the time being at any rate, who's got the notwithstanding clause? Who can override Conservation Authority policy in this area?
I'm not sure, but I'm gonna guess it goes back to the MZO in the province, but maybe.
Well, there's an appeal process, obviously, going to the land tribunal, depending on the nature of the application, but we've had our decisions appealed. So you provide a permit with conditions, they can appeal the conditions or they can appeal the decision. So there's many ways this could go.
Sally would like to add something, and then I have a further on to that one. So stay there, Matt.
So the first thing I would say is we all have to remember that this would be in concert with whatever planning approvals they need from your member municipalities, right? So for example, if a proponent is looking to develop a bog in your municipality, it needs to receive land use planning approval first. And through that, absolutely the appeal process to the land tribunal. And this is a reason why when you receive planning applications, were to be circulated under our regulation to comment on matters of provincial policy on behalf of MNRF. So we would be really hopeful that we would capture those things right out of the gate when you receive your planning application and work in concert with you and the applicant to see, how we can implement this hierarchy. And then following up to your second question, Andrew, and Kelly alluded to this, is the onus is always on the applicant, right? Just as your planners don't do planning for them, we don't develop mitigating plans for them. It's on the applicant's, it's the applicant's responsibility to come in with a proposed plan that meets the criteria that's being set out in the policies that we're putting before you here today. And if they feel that at the staff level, we haven't applied the policy appropriately, we within this organization have a regulations committee, and they could come and present to the regulations committee of MBCA and ask that committee to rule on the matter. So there's an appeal process through your own land use planning mechanisms as well as through our permitting side.
Okay. Sure, go ahead, Bev.
So along the same lines as Andrew's questions, you were saying that there is some authorities that already have this policy in place. Has there been challenges that you know of, and what's been the outcomes? Just because we're probably going to get one somewhere along the line.
Offhand, I'm not sure about challenges to the process, but definitely in my research, I've pulled up everyone else's guidelines and their wording and their process and sort of nuanced it down to us. I have a list of a number of CAs that TRCA started this in 2018. I'm sure they've come up against actually having to apply it. These things are there for a reason, right? And so it's just sort of gradually spreading to here in Eastern Ontario because we're getting these provincial pushes to, development somewhere on constrained sites. So
There is a well-known case in Central Lake, Oshawa, where there was a large warehouse to be proposed in a wetland, and the challenges of offsetting and meeting the conditions. Eventually, I believe the applicant withdrew. It still is challenging, and there's still conditions you have to meet.
Okay, any other before I drop? Okay, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, it's always good to have a solid policy foundation in place, and I think this is a good step forward. I just have a couple of comments. There's going to need to be an education process put in place for our local planners once this comes in. And I think some delicate communication planning is also going to be needed to make sure that people don't see this as how to develop on a wetland. This is how to develop when it must happen. And it should be clear that people don't see this as a guideline for developing on wetlands. I have a question. I know the province changed the way the wetlands are designated.
Yes.
And when you say regulated wetland in this policy, are you talking about designated wetlands or wetlands that we identify as wetlands because the property owner hasn't had somebody else put a definition for us first?
This is going into our policy and reg document where it is text-based, our definition of what a wetland is. So this is beyond what's provincially significant versus locally significant versus other. This is anything that meets our reg definition of a wetland.
Okay. Okay, yeah, here I am. I'm gonna drop a bomb here. I think, I apologize. I missed the policy and planning session. But had I been there, I would have said that perhaps this policy is premature at this time. And that we need to go out and communicate this to our planning people in the municipality so that they understand what is coming and that they're in agreement with it for their own specific municipalities before this goes out as a public policy. I think there needs to be some outside consultation that you have buy-in from the municipalities, particularly the planners in the municipality for this is done. I also have significant concerns about the idea of offsetting when it comes down to starting to look at dollar amounts and what will happen in terms of you say it's going to take $100,000. The builder says, no, it'll only take $10,000. And there's that disagreement and who's the arbitrator. And then the second thing is, I think there needs to be a hearing within the conservation authority, similar to what we do on some of the other ones that Matt's involved in, so that it could be arbitrated here versus taking it to the Ontario Land Tribunal, which is $100,000 to walk in their door. That's the entrance fee, or going to the minister. So I think your policy is premature without that consultation and some very careful thought about how you're going to deal with appeals. Okay, that's my opinion.
So this was discussed at the committee, and one of the things that we absolutely agreed to do and we're planning to do is not necessarily consulting with regarding the policy, but briefing all the planners to have them understand how the policy would be applied. In terms of nailing down the specifics of what we would request from applicants, how we would do those financial calculations, those specifically are not in the document before you because we do recognize they need further work. And that's where we could engage with the local municipalities and other experts in this field. I guess what we're asking the board here today to do is approve in principle, that should a ministerial order come down the pipe or whatever order or decision, quite frankly, of your member municipalities is made, that the Conservation Authority has the right tools available to it to properly apply an offsetting policy, because today we don't. And we have received applications within the past 6 months where point blank people have said, we want to destroy this wetland and we'd like to offset it, and they walk in the door with a dollar value. What this policy allows us to do is say, well, actually, we have a hierarchy that we want you to follow. So first and foremost, you have to demonstrate to us that you had to destroy that wetland on that property, that you had no other choice, that no other property available to you, that you've taken every, reasonable action in your proposal to mitigate or replace those destroyed habitat, and that now we're in a position where we need to look at these potentials for reconstruction of or replacement of habitat, either on-site or off-site. And at the very bottom, not the very walk in the door with cash in your hand, which is the way people like to do it, which is the concern, I think, Jeff, that you alluded to, is that, no, it's the last step in the hierarchy. And it's this hierarchy that we're looking for approval for today, not the mechanics of how it would be implemented. Those are the guidelines that the motion actually, the staff report speaks to, that we need to, work at length behind the scenes to make sure the guidelines that were produced for ourselves as well as for applicants are fair and transparent and meet the needs and objectives of our member municipalities.
Okay, and you used the one word there, transparent. And this is being done at this board level without without the member municipalities having the opportunity to look at it and their planners to look at it. And I think that's transparency instead of coming out with a policy and then them educating them after the fact when they go, well, wait a second, we didn't agree with that. We didn't agree with that. Why didn't you come to us beforehand before you did that? And we could have resolved these things up front. And I really think that would be my position. However, I don't have the opportunity to make a motion on it. So Stephen, do you have another comment?
We talked a bit about it at the planning committee meeting, that things would be worked out before with the applicants and then make a deal before it came, because I was concerned at land division committee, if we turn it down at land division committee or throw that condition out, who's expected to take it to the OM or the land tribunal from the MVCA's point of view? Is the MVCA going to go to land tribunal? Do we have budget for that? Or is it the municipality that's expected to take it to the land tribunal? Or what would happen? Like, it's brand new. We have a land division committee tomorrow. I know there's only 3 of us on it, but if this came, we'd say, what the hell is this? Forget about this one. So there has to be, who's going to put the teeth behind it? You see where I'm going with this?
I may. So let's just take that example, a land division application, a severance application. That's a municipal authority, again, where under our regulation, you are obligated under the Planning Act to circulate us for potential provincial matters of provincial interest. And so when we are circulated, we do provide comments back to you representing the province under that authority. There is also the opportunity at that time, obviously, for us to tell the municipal planners at that time what our concerns would be as MVCA and the requirements of our permits. So in providing our comments back to the municipality as a circulated agency, we would say, here's where we have concerns as representing the province. And here would be our requirements on a go-forward basis. If this is approved, that for this applicant to meet permitting requirements, we would be invoking these policies. And so the applicant, the municipality would know in advance of approval, and the applicant would know in advance of approval that we would be requiring them to follow this hierarchy. So then it's up to the municipality to decide, does it want to approve the application based upon land division committee, depending on how it's organized in your individual municipalities. And then secondarily, when they do come to MVCA for their permit application, if they have received approval from the municipality, are proceeding as they originally proposed, and they don't get the permit from the planning department, then we do have an appeal process here at MVCA. It does come to the regulations committee. Ultimately, members of this board who sit on that committee would make the decision whether or not they feel staff appropriately applied the policy in accordance with the guidelines yet to be developed, or whether they feel comfortable with the proposal that the applicant has tendered. And they are within their rights as the board members of the regulations committee to make that decision on behalf of this board. It does not have to come back to this board. The regulations committee is the arbitrator on permit applications.
Okay, I would still counter that with the fact that we're embroiled in 2 to 3 OLTs right now, where we usually go to mediation, and because of the cost at the municipal level, we're not going to be able, unless we bring in MVCA staff to defend the position, we're not going to be in a position to be able to defend that. And the cost of these things are astronomical. We're even in a mediation right now, and that reduces your cost to 50,000 from 100,000, but 50,000 is a 1% tax levy increase. I would just like to see that this policy is fully supported by the municipalities, okay, rather than just representatives on this board, before it becomes a policy of the MVCA that may end up being very, very costly to municipalities and to the board to try and defend after the fact. That's all. Anyways, any other questions? Okay.
Sorry,
Yes, Andrew.
Just a real quickie, any of our neighboring conservation authorities, have they done something similar yet, or are we the first in Eastern Ontario?
Quinty has definitely been, no, sorry, not Quinty, Cataraqui has definitely been gathering information and going through a similar process of developing things behind the scenes. And then City of Ottawa, like I said, does have a couple lines in their official policy on it. But otherwise, there's not a lot in the east at this time. Rideau Valley has also behind the scenes drafted some documents, but they haven't been brought forward yet.
Okay.
Sorry.
Clark, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to clarify, have there been discussions with planning staff from municipalities about this? Or feedback from the municipalities?
There's been discussions with City of Ottawa staff because we're basically mirroring their policies. So we regulate wetlands. What is the flexibility on developing in wetlands? All the municipalities know our policies. We do have a clause about offsetting. So it's these exact policies have not been discussed, but the concept certainly has. And I'd like to clarify something else. So half the applications we receive about offsetting do not involve a planning application. We need some direction. We go to court. We need some direction for the court, for the justice to say what would be the compensation in this case. So we could delay it for some feedback, but we need it for other purposes as well. So there is a time factor associated with this.
Yeah, I guess I'm a little nervous about supporting this without having had any discussions with city staff on it. And is that, Chair, question to you, were you suggesting that perhaps we defer this decision until more detailed conversations could be had with planning staff?
Okay, well, I probably overstepped my bounds as a chair by mouthing off, but yes, that's what I'm deferring until. That's what I am suggesting, that it deferred until we do a comprehensive discussion with the member municipalities, and particularly the people at the planning staff, to make sure that everybody's on board with this, so they're not blindsided.
Can I move a motion to that effect then, that we defer this decision until more conversations could be had?
I haven't got a clue. Sally, help me.
Yes, I'm drafting it right now, Counselor.
Okay, thank you.
Can I read the,
Can we put a date on that deferral?
yes. Can I? I'll read the motion if it's personal, or you want.
Okay, so now I have two motions in front of me. Do I read the first one and have it defeated, or? The deferral was made. So Clark has made a decision for deferral. He tabled a motion for deferral. At the end of this meeting, I'm going to go and read Robert's Rules of Order. Be resolved that this matter be deferred until that doesn't give you very much time. How about April? April meeting. Do I have someone that will make that motion? Clark is, and Allison, all in favor. Okay. It is, I'm trying to, okay. We're going to have to do a hand count here. All in favor? You can. Okay, we're going for discussion again.
Well, I wanted that for the staff direction, that it not just go to the planners, that the planners take it to council. Because they're the ones that are, it just shouldn't be the planning staff that be put on before it comes back.
That's what was talked about, that it would go to the planning staff and council for approval. Yeah. Okay. Sure.
My only concern with that is we have absolutely no control over when an organization takes something to council. It could be dealt with a year from now. So I think that providing us with a timeline to come back to the board with whatever comments we have received is appropriate. So I'm comfortable with amending the motion to say, can we make it more consultation with member municipalities with the understanding that that is both staff and council and to report with findings in April? Would that be fair? And does that give your member municipalities sufficient time?
Yeah, and I think the members of the board here would be charged with making sure the municipality deals with the matter in a timely manner so that comments are put back in. Okay. So I need all in favor. Okay, we have one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The motion's 5, 6, 7, 8. So I would deem the motion carried. Thank you, and I apologize again for being unable to attend that meeting. Okay, so the main motion is resolve that the Board of Directors approve revision of the wetland offsetting policy and other changes to MVCA development interference in wetlands and alterations to the shorelines and watercourse policies as set out in report 337223. Do we have a mover? Well, I don't know. Tally told me I had to. I would think it would be just dead on arrival because it never, right. That's what we defer. Good. Thank you, Allison and Jeff. Okay, our next report is on the Lower Clyde floodplain mapping study report 3382, and Yuri is doing that. Thank you.
All right, good morning, everyone. I believe this is the last item on today's agenda, and so I will do my best and keep this presentation short and not too technical. So, as you may know, Clyde Valley is a major flood damage center in our watershed. The river has seen several major flood events in the past, including the 100-year event in 2019 and almost a 500-year event in 1998, which you actually can see on these photographs. So that's the 1998 flooding in Lanark. And despite of this, with the exception of two small areas, one in Lanark and one in Cedardale, this river remained largely unmapped. And so we didn't really know what the hazards are. So in the flood risk assessment study that we completed last year, confirmed Clyde as one of our high priority mapping mapping project. And so we initiated this study, and we also secured federal funding for this project from NRCan through the FIMP program. And then basically executed this project this year in collaboration with the Lanark County. Really quickly, for those of you who don't know, Clyde is actually the largest tributary of the Mississippi River system, and it's our second largest river system in our watershed. You know, the availability of affordable properties and proximity of the city makes this area, you know, put some increasing pressures on development. We have many waterfront properties along the Clyde River, and many with existing structures that are already in flood-prone areas. We have 5 major communities along the river, including Lanark, Cedardale, Clydesville, Hearn Mills, and Hopetown, and this study included them all. And we mapped over 45 kilometers of the river, starting at the outlet of Joe's Lake and going all the way down to the confluence with the Mississippi River. So this was, for our scale, you know, it was a very large floodplain mapping study. And we also evaluated both flooding and erosion hazards as part of this study. So I will quickly go through this slide. This is basically our general approach. We follow on all our floodplain mapping project. It's basically, you know, delineate the maps, then prepare the report and documents, then adopt the study for Section 28 regulations, and then share it with the public, with local municipalities. Now, since this project was funded by federal funding, we not only follow the provincial floodplain mapping guidelines, but we also completed this project in accordance with the federal floodplain mapping guidelines. Now, I don't want to go into too much technical detail, as I said, but it was an extensive study. I just want to maybe highlight a couple of things for you. One thing that I would like to say is that this was actually our first floodplain mapping study where we utilized the newly acquired LiDAR data. So we were pretty excited about, you know, having the best data possible, basically, to do this study. The other aspect is we also surveyed the entire 45 kilometers of the river channel from the lake all the way to the Mississippi. You can see that profile of the river channel on that small figure. And again, you know, the value of this data goes beyond this project, right? We will be utilizing this data in future studies. We'll be utilizing this data for building our flood forecasting and warning system, right? And so forth. Now, again, federally funded project, one of the requirements was also to do a climate change study. So we did that, and the purpose of the climate change study was to basically develop a future climate mapping scenario. And the mapping scenario we developed was basically 2050s, right? So basically 30 years from now. And the study basically showed us that what is a 100-year flood event today might become 350 to 400-year event for one of the worst case emission scenarios, right? So that was kind of eye-opening. And also it was good to see these numbers because they also correspond well with what municipalities already adopt and use as a kind of like that worst case climate change scenario. For instance, City of Ottawa, for projects we do with the city, we use the 350 flood event to kind of mimic that future scenario. And I guess then the study was also reviewed and QAQC'd by MUCA staff, by, you know, the consultant, and also the federal technical staff did a review of the study. Now, we spent quite a lot of effort and time on model validation, and maybe, you know, I say we were lucky because this spring we had a flooding in in the Clyde River, and we obviously took advantage of it. We went to the field with our surveying equipment, and we were able to basically precisely take flood elevations throughout the watershed. For the first time, we also used our drone to do aerial surveying of the flooding extent. You can see that on that big photograph here, which was priceless. You know, like you can really see precisely the extent of the flooding, right? And also want to mention that what really helped us here was that we had long-term stream flow data that are operated by Water Survey of Canada and also by MBCA. So we have 4 monitoring gauging locations along the Clyde River that we could use to validate the model. So on the next slide, you can see the spring 2023 event that we are looking at different places in the watershed, in the floodplain, and the red circles or lines means where we observe the flood extent or elevation by foot or with our drone. And as you can see, you know, the model was basically able to match the flooding very accurately, right? So that was good to see. And then I mentioned, you know, the Water Survey of Canada real-time stations that we have in the watershed. This was also very important because we could use this data and simulate historical flood events, right? Like the one in 1998. We had all the data to run the model basically and reproduce the 500-year event or the 100-year event in 2019. So we did that, and again, we used a lot of historical marks and observations that we have in our database to, again, verify the model. And, you know, there were obviously some deviations, but overall, there was a very good agreement between the model and what was observed in the field. So for this project, we produced 15 map sheets in a scale of 1 to 5,000. We used our latest aerial imagery, which is the DRAPE 2019, and produced, you know, the draft maps. Once we had the draft maps, the next step was the review and QA/QC. And an example you can see maybe on this map here is that there is a flooding west of the Highway 511. So this is a typical example of things we would be questioning. You know, is this possible? Can the water actually cross the highway and flood that area, right? So what we did, we went back to the field and did a number of ground truthing trips. We were looking at, you know, identifying culverts. You know, we were taking some additional elevations throughout the watershed just to make sure that everything that the model and the mapping predicts is accurate. So the other thing is, once we had the new mapping done, we wanted to compare it with the existing maps that we had for Lanark and Cedardale. And to our surprise, you know, obviously there were some minor deviations, differences, but overall it was very similar. You know, it was in the same ballpark. So that was actually interesting to see. So once we had the maps finalized, the next step was to identify all the affected properties and infrastructure, right? So this slide here gives you kind of like an overall summary, the total counts of the properties, you know, residencies, bridges, and all that. I'm not going into too much detail here, but you can find the actual addresses and all the details in the floodplain mapping report. And I also have some extra slides here. If there's anything specific you would like to look at, and then we can do it, but otherwise I'm not planning to present it. So, you know, the number of properties, obviously, there are many, but at the same time, we also need to understand that majority of these properties are located in Lanark and Cedardale, our 2 biggest communities, right? Where we already have existing floodplain maps and where the land is already regulated. Now, for the public consultation, so the project notice was published in Lanark Era, on our MBCA website, social media. Then we sent this notice. We contacted all the affected landowners, 378. Then we met with the township and gave presentation to municipal staff, presented the project. And during the consultation period, we also, our staff responded to all public inquiries and so forth that we received. And then we held a public open house last week. Like for this public consultation, we had this nice pamphlet here developed for the project that gave, kind of like an overall summary for the project. And we also had a brochure with frequency asked questions. And we also had a technical poster, right, for that gave some overview of how the project was complete. 19 people attended the open house last week. So there's some few photographs here. We had 2 workstations, one for the areas north of Lanark and the other one for areas including Lanark and then the southern portion of the system. All the comments that we received were recorded and in our database. That is a screenshot of it here. And basically the comments were related to a development of vacant properties, then inquiries about the existing versus new flood lines and regulation limit. One comment was in relation to a meander belt line that we further discussed internally and with the consultant and adjusted our regulation limit as in response to that comment. And we also received at least half a dozen comments from public, basically confirming our new flood lines, which was really nice to hear, having people coming to the open house and saying, hey, in 2019, the flood water stopped right where your flood line is. So it was kind of really nice to hear as well. And I think this is my last slide with our recommendations. So thank you for your attention and let me know if you have any questions.
Yeah. Any questions out there? Janet?
Yeah, just curious, you said there weren't too many changes from what you had existing. Was there anything at all that surprised you or had any feedback from the residences that were affected? Have you had anything significant come back?
I think these were that we receive, during open houses. It's basically public inquiries, where is the flood line running through our property and what are the limitations and whatnot. So, yeah.
Any other questions? Looks like this will be a fantastic planning tool. I don't know, Allison, if you're doing a official plan review right now or have one. You have one ongoing? So this is going to be great for you. The motion is resolved that the Board of Directors adopt the Lower Clyde River floodplain mapping dated December 2023 and the associated GIS-based regulation limit lies and floodplain maps as a delineation of area along the Lower Clyde River that are susceptible to flooding during the regional flood standard as defined in Schedule 1 of Ontario Regulation 153-06. Boy, that was a mouthful. And 2, direct that reports, maps, and regulation limit be used in the implementation of Ontario Regulation 153-06. Do I have somebody to move that? Okay, moved by Dina, seconded by Allison. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. Okay, our last item. Be it resolved that the Board of Director meeting be adjourned. Moved by Allison, seconded by Taylor. All in favor? Carried. And you're missing lunch, folks, on the screen, but it's certainly been nice to have you. Okay?
Enjoy and Merry
Bye.
Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Bye.
Merry Christmas. Sorry I couldn't be there.